Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you all here. Vernon and I are so excited to be with you. We've been having a great conversation about the Harry Potter play in chat, so I'm so excited. Vernon and I are part of Evoke Virtual, and what we focus on is, we always say, really making virtual work for you.
Yeah.
And we focus on all elements of virtual. Primarily, we're going to be talking about training and presentation today, but we also talk about virtual teams and all the challenges we have. We've got a great group of people from all over the world, looks like, today, and that's fantastic. Also, thank you all for giving us great feedback down in our questions below, and we've got a great mix of folks here today. I noticed that some of you are other, and there might be a wide variety of other in that answer. We'd love to find out a little bit more about your roles. Feel free to put that into the insights. We'd love to see that. And I'm seeing we've got a good group of people here that are focused on selecting and soliciting SMEs involvement in their activities. And I think that goes with the reason why you do it, and we hear this all the time, is you want to have the most current information for whoever your audience is. If it's a customer, if it's an internal group, how critical that is for all of you to have that. Makes total sense. You want to have the best in your company, the best in your organization in front of folks. Then we've got a large group of you that are actually the subject matter experts. And I was a subject matter expert when I worked in the medical device industry, and I know, Vernon, you were a finance industry subject matter expert.
Yeah.
And we know that those of you that are subject matter experts, and we're going to take a peek at both sides of this, folks, but we're really going to take a look at it from our subject matter expert for a minute, is as that resident expert, you get pulled in a lot. And you're being asked to do a lot of things all the time. And you're delivering at sales meetings, town halls, in front of customers. So give me a little bit of feedback. All of you will see that there's a hand raise above the slides, a little guy raising his hand. Give me a hand raise if that's your world. You're getting pinged all the time to present. Give us a hand raise. Oh my gosh, I'm seeing a lot. Gina, I know you are all the time. Look at all of you being pinged all the time.
Wow.
And no surprise, and you probably aren't getting a lot of time. So a lot of times we hear from, our subject matter experts that we work with, you feel like you're parachuted in. I love this image. It just makes me really fills in the world there. We know we don't have a lot of time to prep. Oftentimes we've got information that's been working. We're just going to deliver it. And we also know you weren't hired to be a presenter all the time. You might have been, hired to be, an R&D person. I've worked with subject matter experts that are chefs for local wineries. But your credibility is at stake. And now, more and more, we're getting thrown into virtual. And, I think that can be a super challenge for a lot of us if we're used to, that great environment of in-person and seeing people. And I think that, Vernon and I have heard a lot, it can feel like you're dropped onto Mars.
Yeah, and Laura, I want to take a step back for a second, and let's take a look at what they've been putting in the new chat box down below about what kind of environments that they've been presenting in, live and online, Jackie, remote, office, virtual, Diane, in-person. So take a look at all of that, guys. We're all different types of environments. And then on the right side, go ahead and fill out that poll. How much time do you get? How much time do you generally get when you're asked to parachute in? As all of you raised your hands when we said that. Go ahead, let's take a moment and fill that out, and I'll be quiet just for a second there. How much time do you get? And Laura, it looks like a lot of folks are less than 2 to 4 weeks. That's not bad. What do you think about that, Laura?
I think that's not bad. I'm in complete awe of the folks that get more than a month, and that's super. But I think when you think about it, 2 weeks or less, wow. You're busy rolling through. You got to be thinking about what you're going to do.
And it's not your only job, right? It's not it's not the job you actually get paid for. It's something you're doing in addition to that. I'm sure you all can agree on that. All right, so with that, with less than 2 weeks, and then you're plopped into this, like Laura said, you're on Mars, and give us some feedback here. And what I want you to do, I'm going to draw a line in the feedback so we can see where you, in the insights box there. So give us some feedback on what are some of the things you're most concerned about when presenting virtually. If you presented virtually or if you have to. What do you fear there? Go ahead and type it in chat. And I'm going to look, I'm sorry, it's right in that insights box there. Go ahead and type that in. Yeah, technology mishaps. Thank you, Lee. Something goes wrong. Chris's lack of interaction. We have a number of things there. No audience feedback, can't see them nodding. And one of the things that's important to do is and we'll talk about this, is to do just what we're doing right now. So we're getting some of your feedback, and you're really participating here, and we appreciate that, as you guys can see that. So, Laura, do you see anything that surprises you there? I'm looking through the list here.
I'm not seeing a lot of surprises, but I am seeing some really consistent things of what we see. You know, Denise, you said lack of interaction. I'm seeing Paula and a lot of folks, you know, Leslie and others saying technology, which we hear a lot.
Right.
And then Elaine, I love what you said, just bad presenters.
I
just
like
being
that.
afraid of having bad presenters.
Bad presenters, yeah. That can be the key. So with all these issues, guys, technology failures, inability to quickly evaluate your audience, and you see we try to do that early on with the poll. We try to do that. But so not only are these things working against you, but on top of all of these fears that you have, it's the time is working against you. And here's what I always say. I work with subject matter experts every week. And one of the things I say is the good news is that you know everything. And the bad news is that you know everything. So time is working against you because you want to be thorough and accurate, because you really love it, as I do. When I talk about finance, I love my topic. But you know, people start to hang up if you start to get into the weeds. Or if you go 1 minute over the time that was allocated for you. But overall, we know that your goal, and my goal as subject matter expert, is to really have the audience, like you are our audience, to really remember and retain the information. So it's just really important when you think about this. We've seen presenters recognize that, you know, time is of the essence, and sometimes what happens is you realize that, hey, I don't have enough time left, and I start to speed up really fast. Do me a favor, raise your hand if you've ever been presenting, and all of a sudden you realize you only have a few minutes left, and you start to really speed up. Yeah, and we have the tendency to really do that, and the problem is that the faster we talk, the less people get. So the issue is you can't say everything, because retention is the key here. And there's a simple formula for that, retention. And if your audience walks away or they stay and don't pay attention, the result really is the same, which is reduce retention on their part and limited adoption of whatever you're talking about. So if you take a look at this image here in this equation, retention equals virtual engagement plus the value you're bringing divided by the denominator is the complexity of the content. The complexity of the content. So the good news here is that if you're not a great virtual presenter, but you have good value, the more you reduce the complexity of the content, the better it works for you. So if you're not great, if you don't have great vocal quality or don't have a lot of energy, the more you make it simple for people, the better it is to remember it. Now, let me ask this question, and I want you to give me a green check if this is true for you. So it's where the hand raise is, where that little man's hand at the very top. How many of you realize that sometimes when you're talking or when you're presenting as a subject matter expert, that you're just starting to get into the weeds? And while you're talking, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm still talking, and I'm just talking. Give me a green check if that has ever happened to you as a subject matter expert, that you realize yourself that you're getting into the weeds and you don't know what to do. Yeah,
I'm seeing a lot of green checks, Vernon.
Yes. And what I say at that point is just to stop for a moment, gather yourself, and maybe ask a question to the group. And what I want you to realize here is that it's not what you say that's the most critical. It's what you as a subject matter expert leave out. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment, because it's a little bit backwards there. It's not actually what you say, it's what you leave out that makes all the difference on retention. So if you say too much, it's diminishing returns to all the other good stuff you say. So as a subject matter expert, your job is to edit all the time and reduce the complexity. Because by reducing complexity, like I said again, and here's another point that I mentioned earlier, but I want to highlight it, it's going to compensate for some of the virtual engagement challenges that you may have in the room. And Laura, we work at this all the time, and we both agree that at the whole heart of this thing, right, is engagement. That's it.
Yeah, and we know, and I was thinking, Kirsten wrote a great comment, that a challenge to replicate the classroom vibe online, and I agree, and it is, because we have found in surveys we've done of hundreds of attendees at events that 83% of folks say that it's at the start of a virtual event the participants are assessing, just like you were doing here. Give me a hand raise if you were assessing whether you were going to multitask, be able to do email and other things. I'm seeing all sorts of hand raises. Don't spare our feelings one bit. Absolutely. And, think about it for a second. That really means that our content experts, if you are one, and those of you that are trying to support the success of a content expert, that you really have to help them focus on things that are going to help them be successful. And we've really boiled it down to 3 critical areas that we think if you focus on, it'll help not only do what Kirsten was talking about, replicate that vibe of in-person, but, deal with retention and hopefully get to where Tony said, MeetingOne facilitation services, rock solid, that you have that consistently. So let's take a look at what those are, because that's what we're going to focus on in our time together, because you've got to do it in the moment. That's the one thing I want you to have in the back of your mind the entire time that Vernon and I are sharing some ideas with you. And by the way, I wanted to say, don't frantically take notes or think you need to do that. We've got a great ebook that you can get at the end, and also there'll be a recording available if you have colleagues or you have to leave early that you can listen to. So let's take a look at what we're going to focus on today. One is we want to make sure that we're creating rock-solid connections. And I think that is one of the keys. Think about when we're in person. We're having chats just like we are here. We're getting to know the people in the room so that we get their attention and they see that value. So remember, it's about virtual engagement plus value to your listeners that are going to offset your content complexity and get your retention up. We've got to help people listen. They're there for a reason. You're all here to pick up things to help you. So we've got to find ways to do that, because all of you, particularly whether you're selecting an SME or you are an SME, you're in the business of influence. Absolutely. And the other is we've got to make this in virtual environment work. It can be really intimidating, particularly if you have to go into multiple ones, but we've got a lot of great opportunities and tools here in the Adobe Connect platform. How do you use those effectively? So let's dive in, because we said it before, Vernon, that we know engagement is the key. How do you do that in the virtual room?
Yeah, and the question is, how do you do that? And I want to just back up on what Laura just said on these three things. They're in the moment, which means we're doing them from the beginning of the session to the very end of the session. We're creating rock-solid connections. We're compelling our audience to listen. And we're also making the best use of the virtual environment that we can. And one of the ways that Laura and I use with all our clients is this simple engagement principle, and we call it talk, text, and select. The idea behind this is to make sure that you keep your audience active and not static. And so at some point, and in a group this large, you wouldn't be able to do it, but if you're at 30 or less, you could. You want to have another voice in the room. You want to have them talking. Right, ask them a question, bring them on, and have them talk. And in smaller groups, I want to emphasize that if people are in the room, in a room that they don't have a lot of background noise, if I'm in a smaller conference setting of 30 people or less, I like to have my people not put themselves on mute. I think that's really important unless they have background noise. Type in chat, why do you think I'm ask people not to put themselves on mute? Go ahead, type in chat. Why do you think I asked them not to do that? Right, thank you, Chris. Engaged attention. Thank you, Eileen. Stay engaged. Yeah, they're free to participate because, you know, you've all been on the calls where someone will go, you'll ask someone a question and then there'll be silence. You know, they've been off multitasking. And since Laura was using the Harry Potter, and thank you, everyone, Joy Cross-Smith, pay attention, yep. Jennifer, less likely to multitask, exactly. Because I'll use Laura's analogy, comment with Harry Potter. It's the great cloak of invisibility, as you know, when you put yourself on mute. So you want to have people talking if it's a smaller group. If it's a larger group like this, you want to have them texting, and we say text, typing in chat or asking questions or annotating on the screen. Have them do something like that, right? And finally, with polls, you want to have them select an answer in a poll. So talk, text, and select. But the main thing I want you to understand here is it has to be every 3 minutes in virtual. Every 3 minutes. And thank you guys for typing in the insights box there. Very good thoughts there. Every 3 minutes. And so just think about that. Here's our mantra. And don't worry about taking notes here. This is going to be recorded, but also we have a great ebook that you'll be able to download after the session that outlines everything we're talking about. So to do this well, you need to make, like Laura said, rock-solid connections, really rock-solid connections with your audience. And again, I'm going to use that word in the moment because that is so important. And not at any time can you forget about your audience, not at any time. So let me ask you a question, and I'll put a chat pod right there. Why do you, we did it at the very beginning of this session with the polls, why do you want to ask questions at the very beginning of any virtual program that you're doing? Go ahead, type the answer in chat right there. Right at the very bottom there, yeah. Right, thank you, Jessica, to engage. You need to find out what they want. Exactly, thank you. Laura, do you see any other? Why don't you pick some out there that you see as well?
Yeah, there's some great ones. I mean, test the audio. Make sure that you can unfreeze yourself. I love that, Karsten. I can think of so many ways. Build rapport. And, you know, the other thing, I also want to pull something out that Shelby noted, and I love it, that Leslie said. You know, you want to always be thinking about the item of text, the select, you know, our as an instant intervention. Wow, isn't that great, Vernon? I just love that instant intervention. Like you know, always being able to connect. But I love it. Danita says to get the knowledge level of the group because, again, it's about that value part of the retention equation.
Yes, and thank you guys and thank you, Laura, for that. And all of these things that you guys see on the screen, so important that we do that. And I like it because it unfreezes us, but it gets them warmed up right away, right? It's a warm-up thing. And really, you guys want to know that Laura and I care about what we're talking about. So we want to interest them, and we need to sound interested. And then, like you guys said, you can use the information to check back. And as Laura will probably tell you, I'm a real stickler for anything you do in the room has to be related to the content. So I'm not really a big person around, warm-up chats that aren't connected to the topic. I think you can have an interesting warm-up chat that's connected to the topic because, like in this webinar, we have 45 minutes. We don't have time to play around with things that aren't connected to what we're talking about. And as you guys see in what you're typing here, you can also uncover ways to influence their thinking, and so that everyone in your audience will be more receptive to your recommendations. So really, again, your audience wants to feel like you enjoy the topic and they want to share that with you. And that's why you warm them up in the very beginning. And after you've assessed them, you can ask different types of questions because asking questions is awesome. And here's just an example of some of the questions that we asked earlier in this session. What are some of the concerns that are that you have most about presenting in the virtual room? What, as a content expert, how much notice do you get? So we're sizing our audience up. How many of you realize that you're trying to communicate too much information in a moment? So these are some of the questions that you can ask to challenge them. But be careful that your question type aligns with what you want to know. Okay, that's so important. If you want to do a quick one, you can just do a yes or no, like Laura and I have been doing. Raise your hand. We get some information there. That's an informal poll. Or give us a green check. That's really a formal poll. So those are other things that you can do around questioning to bring people in the room. And also you can get other people's voices in smaller groups in the room. But questioning is really important.
And
Laura,
I was going to comment, Vernon, and what I loved about some of the things that are in here about how important questions are, several people, and Shelby, you've noticed it, we can find other SMEs. If you ask people questions, you may find expertise you didn't know about, and that can help to broaden the availability of SMEs in your organization. So I think those are great insights about how you pull the knowledge out. So we know that's a great way to get dialogue and engagement. It helps me to know more, Vernon to know more about you. There's another approach to getting people to listen and to retain info, and it's one that I think isn't going to surprise you, and that's stories. And whether you're dealing with technical data or you're dealing with what I've been recently coaching, because I do have the benefit in the San Francisco Bay Area, being close to Napa and Sonoma counties, any wine lovers out there, there's a lot of wineries that need help, believe it or not, with virtual presentations. And I often tell the chefs that I have to work with, tell stories, because those are things that can really help you. And I'm curious, give me some feedback. Give me a hand raise. How many of you routinely use stories to try to illustrate points in your training? Oh, super. I'm seeing Nancy, Andra, Robert, Carrie, a lot of you. Matter of fact, it looks like the majority of you are using stories. And I think that's fantastic. And as a former SME, and I came from the medical device world, I spent a lot of time presenting masses of data and process. Stories were my best friend. And I don't think that's going to surprise any of you. Here's a question I have that's a little different. How many of you find you get pushback when introducing data and lots of facts? Give me a hand raise if that sounds familiar to you. How many of you, yeah, Eileen, Sarah, Jerry, I'm seeing that. It's pretty easy to push back. It really makes sense. When you've got a data-rich presentation, it's really critical to tell the audience what the data means before showing them the details. I mean, details, we can pick those apart, can't we? You have to pre-digest the data and connect the dots. And stories are a fantastic way to do it. So here's some research I am so excited to share with you because it also comes local from Stanford's Graduate School of Business close to my home. And one of their psychologists and professors there did a study to show what makes things memorable. How do we get data to stick? So what they did was they had the study participants present a 1 minute, just 1 minute, persuasive presentation that included 2 or more statistical measures, so numbers, metrics. 10 minutes after hearing everyone's presentations, The researcher asked them all to write down everything they could remember. I don't think it's going to surprise anyone. 63% remembered the story as opposed to the statistical measures. Jerry said nothing. They remembered nothing. That could have happened, absolutely. And I love that. You know, Brittany made the comment, you know, get people connected personally to what you're trying to teach and give them a real world. Only 5%, and it's probably those folks that have more of an attention span than I do, you know, remembered the statistics. So the take-home, wrap story around your facts, your data, your process. There are a lot of other ways to make things visible in the virtual room. And a lot of you probably use analogies and metaphors. And not my strength, but Vernon, you are the metaphor man.
I do love metaphors, and I love analogies. And I think because of this 63%, I think it's really, really important that we paint a picture for our audience. And that goes, remember the equation, and it's going to be in our ebook, but the denominator was complexity. An analogy or metaphor can reduce the complexity of whatever you're talking about. So one of the challenges when we work with subject matter experts on a daily basis is that they have a hard time, and you guys, maybe you, look in the mirror, have a hard time explaining issues in layman's language. And I usually call it kitchen English. Like, can we be how simple can we get? Raise your hand if you feel like you've heard that before or seen that in action. Can you explain what you're saying in layman's language? Yeah, we have a few, and it's hard to do. It's hard to do. One of the things we try to do is to use an analogy. And an analogy is to make something like something that people can understand, to put it in a context that people can understand. So I was working with a technology SME who was, you know, the Exec didn't care about the architecture, but they had a hard time understanding how much storage could be in 12 gigabytes. So the expert said, well, how big is 12 gigabytes? You can see here, it's enough memory to play music to the moon and back. So that gave them an anchor with which to take in the information that SME was talking about. Analogies are good, are really a good way to help people link things to what the listener, the SME is talking about. Now, Laura also mentioned metaphors, which I like, and to be cute, I'll say that analogies are the doors to meaning. And I'm being cute, I know, that's a metaphor. It's a metaphor, but that really, it says it all, right? If you can do an analogy and make it simple, it opens the door for your audience to understand. So do me a favor. Give me a green check if you use or have heard SMEs use analogies or metaphors. Go ahead and do that. Give me a green check or raise your hand, one or the other. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to invite you right now to, if you have any good metaphors or analogies that you think are rock solid, please feel free to go ahead and type those into the insights box just so everybody can see them. And thank you, Laura. Laura typed in there, what analogies or metaphors do you use? Because I find these are very, very helpful. And if you have some that are good, I steal them from other people if I think that they're really good. So,
and Vernon, I have to steal them.
Please. Yep.
I was just going to say, Vernon, I have to steal them. I'm not that good at them.
Oh, I like that. Look at Diane said, now that's a metaphor. Leadership is like changing a tire on a moving car. Now that's an analogy. Thank you. Building blocks and brain science. Why don't you say a little bit more about that, Marcia, if you could? Thank you, Corey. Understanding using various browsers is like having multiple ways to work. You have your favorite and then your default, but you also have other ways if there's traffic or other obstacles. Oh, I really like that. Thank you. So good job, and continue typing those in because those are all really important to have a good stash, especially so these are you're typing them in so Laura can actually seal them. But when you sorry, Laura. In addition to creating this great connection with your audience, and as Laura went over earlier, you always have to compel your audience to listen. And again, that's in the moment, which is so, so important. So here's a poll for you. And remember, we're following our guideline for every 3 minutes, but we're probably a little quicker than that, right? And I think it was Jackie had a question earlier about how do you figure out every 3 minutes without losing your place, losing focus of teaching. And my answer, if you saw me type in chat, was I generally look at the timing on the computer, like at the right-hand side, I have a little clock down there, or after a while it just becomes a feel of, gosh, I haven't heard from them in a while. So that's really important. But here's the question for you. Other than the content, what are the reasons people disengage or stop listening during an informational webinar? And you guys have already started answering as I was chatting. And Laura, there's no surprise here. No surprise here whatsoever. And let's make sure we're broadcasting those results. I'll click that so everybody can see it. So we're up at 70-something% on speakers delivery. Wow, thank you guys for that. Yeah, Lee says all of these issues. Yes, they're all bad. They're all bad. But people start leaving. I can imagine that speaker delivery is just so critical. And so let's take a look at that. And we'll take that because we figured that would be a top one. And listeners, like I said, want to know that you're excited and that you enjoy what you're talking about. They want to enjoy listening to you. They really want to do that. And, if I said, good morning, welcome to our session today. Today we're going to cover all aspects of training. Oh, good to see everybody. Like to see where you're from. Man, that would be, I don't know that'd be terrible. So type in chat here, what about a speaker's voice can make it difficult to stay engaged? And Amber says monotone. Lee says talking too fast, and I have a tendency to do that sometimes, so I'm going to slow down a little bit. Not interesting. Yeah, monotone is big. Dull. And when I say dull, and thank you for that, dull, I think dull comes, Sheila wrote that, I think that comes from being monotone. Because when our audience listens to us, they want to pick out what's important. And we can do that by emphasizing things. But when you're monotone, you don't emphasize, and then people will say it's dull. Thank you, Shelby. Too loud, too soft. So all these things, or someone's reading, thank you, Al, if you're just reading the guide, which no one likes to hear anyone reading a guide. So all of these things, audio distortion again, thank you, Jackie. So when we signed on, Laura wanted to make really sure that we had good audio quality, and we'll talk about that. Looking at this, and we know that words are important, and we know that pausing and emphasis and inflection is critical. We also know that words, though, aren't enough. Words alone can't achieve understanding, and especially in virtual, words are important, but there are other things. And Laura, we talked about research, and Laura's done some research on this.
Absolutely, and I wish that words were it, but let's think about it. Someone talked about brain science. I love that, Marianne, is, we need to think about how do humans really bring in information. And Dr. Linnell Burmack and, a group at the Thunberg Center for Professional Development have really studied this. And we know that we link information to images. So what that means is that if it doesn't connect to something that we see visually, because so much of our brains, those of you that love brain science, there's various numbers, 20%, 30% of our brain is really focused on taking in images and visual information. So what that means is that's going to help with that retention. And boy, you've heard Vernon and I say it. If we're going to get people to change things, we need to have them retain the information. And images can really, really help us with that. And there's tons of great things tons of great research that's been done. Matter of fact, MIT just completed a study fairly recently in their neuroscience department where they do fantastic things and published it that if you use images, the ability to understand and to view time for images goes way, way down. So my point is, I think enough said. You can give us some feedback, make sense. Images really help us organize. Look at this mess over here. Organize information into some clear things and get those ideas in place. And what you want is long-term memory. That's the key. So let's put this into practice. And I want you to give me some feedback. As the next image comes up, I want you to see how fast that you can get the key takeaway. Okay, that's it. How many of you right now, give me a hand raise, or you can give me a red check if you can. Someone tell me what the key takeaway is. Can you do it? Give me a hand raise if you can. I'm seeing everyone saying too busy, man on the moon, complex, NASA. Kirsten, I agree. Ugh. That's crazy. Yeah, it's really, really tough. And you've got this question, how would you change this slide? Yeah, it is spaghetti, small font. Simplify, simplify. Absolutely, Gretchen.
Yep, Gretchen, that's it.
Kevin, you got it. And it took some time probably to dig through. It's time to get to Mars and back. Yeah. Eddie, you said it. Makes your brain hurt. Find a way to break it into parts, Marianne. I love it. Animate, Shelby. Great.
Well, I'd love to know how many of them see slides like these every day in their organizations.
Oh, my gosh. Give me a hand raise if you see slides like this. Oh, my gosh. All the time. All the time.
Wow, look at that.
I know. It's crazy. And I love the ideas on here. So let's look at how we simplified the information. And there's a great expertise to help you out there on visuals. The goal is just to make sure that, things are really understandable for people. So let's take a look at our approach, and I think it went to where several of you had breaking this up, is the first thing is let's do a build and simplify it, because the key thing on here is how much time is it going to take? We've got 6 months. And there's a trajectory, a window that we have. And the key is we need to know what that window to return is as much as we need to know how much time it's going to take to get to Mars. Because if we don't, whoa. And anybody who's seen my favorite movie, The Martian, knows that if you miss that flight window, 500 more days on Mars. So breaking it up, and Vernon's laughing because he doesn't want to have 500 more days on Mars and try to figure out how to grow potatoes. But we see that, that's a really important issue, is to break that on. So one of the things that we need to do is we really need to deal with your SMEs, though, feeling like they've landed on Mars, because it's not as simple as just all these engagement tools. We've got to deal with that environment.
Yeah, so no one wants to feel like they're on Mars, and when you're on Mars, like in the movie, he had to figure out all the systems that were on the ship to really make the best of it. And when you get in a virtual room, you may not know everything, all the different tools you have to use in your virtual platform. Let me ask you this. How many times do you walk into a session, maybe like 5 minutes before the meeting and have to log into a virtual session? How many people do that? Walk in with short notice, walk in 5 minutes before they have to present, or seen people do that? Raise your hand if you've seen people walk in just a few minutes before you're about to present. Yeah, and that could definitely bring some challenges, because the virtual room, you've got to know your virtual room, plus a whole host of other things could go wrong that we want to make sure that we have covered.
And, Vern, I've got to tell a little bit of a horror story here, and this is really for those of you that are helping SMEs be more successful. I was co-teaching, by the way, a great best practice. If you've got a great virtual presenter, instructor, have them work with maybe a great subject matter expert that needs support. I was launching a new program for a sales group, and the SME did walk into a separate facility. his room 5 minutes before and found not only did the room that he booked not have a telephone, not even a speakerphone, but it had no internet connection. So he had to run madly around the building finding a place, and unfortunately had to use his cell phone, and it was a little bit of a disaster, and we really had to fill in the gaps. And extra time, before you go in, I just always recommend it.
Our extra time is so critical. And when we think about the virtual platform, I just want you to keep it simple. Pick simple tools. You can get a lot of interaction, as you've seen us use the green check today, the hand raise, and we have you type, we've renamed it Insights, but we have you typing in chat. And we've also had some other chat boxes come up from the bottom of the screen. So don't feel pressured to have to use all the tools. All right, if you're new to it, we call this level 1, the check, the hand raise, and the chat. Now, if you feel a little more adventurous, go ahead and use level 2, which is drawing functions where you get people to draw on the screen like I'm doing right now, and also poll functions. We've done the polls today, and you've seen that. And if you're really adventurous, use level 3, which is screen sharing or the Q&A. Now, you may say, well, why are you screen sharing all the time? Here's the challenge with screen sharing in a lot of platforms, is that once you screen share, you lose the ability to easily see some of the other things like chat and hand raise and those types of things. So you lose sometimes the interaction with your audience. So screen sharing is, thank you, Shelby, screen sharing is the #1 misused method of content delivery. I totally agree with that. So, and sometimes, like I said, screen sharing, you lose your ability and all these other great functions you have. So keep it simple, and then if you're going to use more tools, plan it out really well. The other thing that I think is really important is your audio. And when Laura and I talk, Laura is always a stickler for audio.
I am. I think audio is really critical. And you're going to notice that both Vernon and I are using different types of headsets. You need to find something that works for you. But think back on that story I told you earlier. My poor co-presenter, such a knowledgeable guy. He had to use his mobile phone to deliver, all of that training. The sound was terrible. A lot of people dropped off, which of course means we're not meeting our business objective. So you want to maximize the quality of your audio because you're not going to be able to control what your listener is on. They may be on a speakerphone, which is going to dampen the audio quality. Connection speeds can, if you're using different kinds of phone systems, can really mean dropped words and less audio quality. Don't use speakerphones. That's my #1. Don't do it if you can at all help it, because it'll just dampen everything. So let me ask a question of all of you. Give me a green check or a hand raise if you want. How many of you routinely use headsets when you're presenting virtually? Give me a hand raise. Love to see how many of you. Good.
Okay, now they're coming in fast and furious now. Yep.
Yeah, fantastic. And one of my hints for those of you that are supporting SMEs, get a group of headsets that work in your phone system and your environment and make those available, because that will really help them be successful. And remember, you're not in the business of entertainment. Someone asked if we had a script. We script and practice, but we just want to talk in our natural, authentic voice. For folks that we coach, if you're a subject matter expert, people know you because of how you sound. So this is not about broadcasting. It's about having good quality audio.
And as we wrap this up today, one of the things I think is really important is that an SME has to have a real good tactical action plan. So we've given a lot of best practices today, and you shared some of your challenges, and you've also shared some of your metaphors and analogies, and we talked about images. But if you're helping SMEs, or if you are an SME, the first thing you need to do when you're assigned something is to know where you're going to present it. So, like Laura said, check your physical space, right? And then I'm a stickler about this. Confirm the start time of your session. And also time zone. We had some logistical mishaps during one delivery, and luckily I logged in an hour early because there was a time zone difference. And in the fall, you know, there's times when some people go on daylight savings time, and there was a big mishap around that. So time zones are always important. So start time and time zone. Second thing, like we did today, we logged in even earlier, but log in at least 30 minutes before your session. Do an audio check like Laura did, and she's really a stickler for that. And then coordinate with your host if you're lucky enough to have one, right? Do the audio check beforehand. Make sure the slides are good. Make sure you know how to use all your tools. And then during the event, I want you to use our methodology here of talk, text, and select. Get their voice in the room, get them to use the text tool, and have them select using polls or the hand raise or the green check. So when we look at everything we talked about, tools, it's really important to have a good platform to be able to achieve all the goals you want to. So you can also get through this a free trial of Adobe if you like to. It's right here for you. Adobe is a great platform that allows you to make it feel like you're in the face-to-face classroom. It has a lot of the tools to do that. So remember, create rock-solid connections, compel your audience to listen, and also work on that virtual environment and make it work for you. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're going to stay on for some questions if you have some in the Q&A box. You can type those in. On August 10th, they're going to have another session, so be ready for that. And at the bottom, you can get some information on MeetingOne and our company that Laura and I run, Evoke Virtual, where we make virtual work. So thank you so much, and we'll hang on for questions. Thank you very much for your great participation today.
Yes, thank you, everyone. For those of you that are leaving, great. Have a great week. For those of you staying, we'll cover questions. And Vernon, we've got a few questions, and I think they were very interesting ones. One, Lee had asked, do we use a script, and what's our template? And my answer to Lee was yes, we do script, but we also feel that we need to be having a conversation and to obviously deliver in the way that we would recommend that you do. So we do practice, and we also make sure, and I'm going to say in our script, probably the most important thing you can do for yourself are transitions. Make sure that you know and you set up in the minds of your audience where you're going next. And if you've got multiple speakers, that can be a great way to cue who's going to come on next. But someone said it, I think several of you said it, practice. You got to practice, 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 practice. That's really clear. I don't know if I've got a whole list of questions here, Vernon. If you've got some, there's just some great ones that I want to cover.
Joni wrote, how do you deal with poor audio background noise from attendees while not having them mute? That's a difficult one. That is really a difficult one. And generally, you're going to have to mute them if there's poor background noise. I don't know. Laura, you have any other suggestions on that? I know we have a producer that works with, we generally don't go without a host or a producer that works with that in the background and is constantly on that because that is a particular problem, Joni.
It is, and I will add that one, I oftentimes either our producer or myself as the instructor will constantly remind folks. And one of the great tools that you have with integrated audio, which we really recommend integrated audio in your system, is you can see the little telephones move next to people's name to find out who your biggest offenders are. And sometimes a private chat, they may not be aware of it. Maybe they are cooking dinner for the family while they're listening to you because of the time zone differences. You can ask them individually if they would please personally mute their phone, and that can sometimes help. But that is a huge problem, particularly in large arenas like this. Now, one of the questions, and I think this goes, Shelby had asked a question about using webcam versus static pictures. And you're going to notice that Vernon and I do a mix. And one of the reasons is that in a highly interactive program, and it's a real philosophy we have, we don't want anything to distract from either the information or the chat or the interactions in the room. So we usually do a combination. In a smaller training program, let's say 25 or 30 people or less, we may come on at the beginning. We love to have pictures of our participants in there. And then we design and deliver such active programs that we don't want to distract. So we may have our pictures, just as you saw there. The benefit of the pictures, let's say someone comes in or out late, at least they know they're in the right place. And then we like to close with a camera on. But we firmly believe that having the camera on also reduces the ability of you as an instructor to be engaged with all the elements of the room. Because to make eye contact, I got to be staring straight at the camera. And I want to be monitoring. Right. There's a lot going on that we want to be monitoring because you have super input. So Shelby, I think that was a great question and a common one. It's really a mix. Vernon, other questions that you've got?
Yeah, Amy asked if we work with small companies to help them implement virtual programs. I said, yes, we do, and my email's right in the box there. Also, you can download our ebook, and our contact information is in there as well. Let's see.
Yeah, and Shelby, that would be one of the things that we do a lot of is what Vernon was talking about is coaching. And we live in a global society, and we've got a great global team that we all work with. And sometimes there are issues of accent or cultural delivery of language.
I don't know, is there anything in there that you would...
And also, making sure that we've got everyone on mute too will be important, is having people get coached. Sometimes it's as simple as teaching some good delivery skills, helping them slow down, articulate language more. But that really is a good, coaching tool that you're going to want to develop to help them. Other questions that you had as we're starting to wrap up here, Vernon?
I didn't have any other ones, Laura. Let's see.
Well, we talked a little about, I know that.
Quality.
Yeah, Joni brought that up also, is just thinking about ways to improve that, making sure that you've got people on mute. And I want to just remind everyone, definitely take the webinar survey. We want feedback. And you'll also know that you can download the ebook. Please look down at the bottom. You'll see the free ebook, and that'll really help you with even more information on ways that you can coach and help your SMEs. Well, good. Looks like we're coming to our wrap-up here, Vernon. Again, if there are any more questions, please let us know. We've got a few more minutes.
Yeah, and if you have any other ones, just go ahead. If we don't get a chance to answer them, go ahead, and my email address is in there. Laura, I'm going to put yours in there as well, Laura.
Yeah. It's pretty simple. It's Laura at evokevirtual.com.
I'm sorry, I typed in evokevirtual.com, exactly.
So Hank has an interesting comment. And Hank, you can put a little more detail.
I'm listening. I'm on a call.
And I would like each person to be online at the same time. That is a real challenge if you're in a noisy environment. And I think that's a case where if you've got a lot of people that you want all online at the same time, I would make sure, Hank, that I was in another location from that environment. I'd be in a quiet zone, and you may have to do what we do here. Even if it's a small group, use chat and other elements. If someone, the one thing that they can do is if they're using a noise-canceling headset, that can help you too, because it can limit the amount of noise in the background. But that's a toughie, and one that I know a lot of you face. Well, good. I think that we are coming to a close. Thank you all for your fantastic questions. Again, if you have any colleagues that want to hear this, make sure that you link them to the recording. And we wish you all well. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone. Get your time. Thank you.